The Time Shift.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Time Shift. This week I'm reviewing the latest season of Doctor Who, aka Season 15, aka Season 41, aka Season 2, depending on your point of view. And we kick off this review as we do with these kind of reviews with the positives and the headline positives. All the big things I'm discussing over the course of this side of the video. I think this was a far more consistent season than last season. It continues to be imaginative and creative, and overall has a lot more of a settled and calmer tone. I will admit that me saying that this season was more consistent might sound like damning with faint praise, but I'll be brutally honest here. Save for the endings of a couple episodes, the majority of this year's season for me has been better than the last season. Not counting the final episodes, I will admit, but that's a matter we'll touch upon later on. Each episode, aside from those, has been strong for me. I can't say that this year's season has featured episodes that are my most favourite ever, let alone over the past decade, but I still think that they were good for what they were. They were of a consistent high quality, and it never felt as though we were going through some kind of rough patch or a boring patch, or that a given episode was the bad one of the season, as there had been the case in past seasons. And there was never a point where I went into one of these reviews thinking, oh boy, what a mess, or oh boy, what am I going to talk about here? Well, apart from the final two episodes, but again, we'll talk about that later on. And I will be honest with you, there was never a moment where I was worried as to what I would talk about with a given episode. Even if I didn't enjoy it as much as maybe I was hoping to, or there were certain aspects of it that I didn't quite click with, I still got something out of pretty much every single episode, and the only time I found myself asking, what am I going to write about, what am I going to talk about, are the moments where I forgot to write notes because I was just so invested with the episode itself. This season, for me, has been more hit than miss, again, aside from the final two. For me, the majority of the episodes this season were good, even if at the end of the day they didn't quite stick the landing, but that is something we'll discuss in the latter half of this video. And it was, I will be honest, kind of a relief to be able to go from episode to episode being largely satisfied with what I saw. Yes, there were some issues here and there, things I will discuss shortly, but aside from those, we were getting to a point where I was starting to get slightly excited as to what the next episode might have for us. And that's not a feeling that I've had with Doctor Who for a very long time. I don't think I've felt excited going into a new season or a new episode of Doctor Who really since before the Capaldi era. And I don't mean to rag on the Capaldi era, but that's the era I started doing my reviews, and, well, those of you who know, I wasn't the best fan of that era at the best of times. And a great contributing factor to all of this for me is just how imaginative and creative some of the episodes can be. And I'm not talking about the obvious ones like Lux, or to varying different degrees in the Interstellar Song Contest and the Story Engine episode, as even with other episodes there was at least one element that I thought was interesting, something that really elevated and make it feel a lot more different, a lot more dynamic and interesting than I certainly think that it could have been in the hands of a different writer or a different showrunner. I'm not going to do a greatest hits here, as you can easily go back to watch my prior reviews for greater details on what I thought about a given episode that we've had over the past few weeks, but there were still, more often than not, episodes that really did click with me, and even in episodes I didn't like, there were elements of it that I could at least say, you know what, that was a neat twist, that was a great element, that was a great moment, and that these twists, these turns, these elements added in are done in a way that even if the episode itself ultimately turns out to be, let's be honest, conventional, you boil away some of the more eccentric wrappings and you just get an episode where it's the Doctor plugging a thing into a thing and then the villain disappears. At the end of the day, the journey to get us to that point was still interesting and was still fascinating and still exciting to get there to one degree or another, or at least something that make you go, you know what? That was a neat idea. And whilst I do wish that there were more episodes this season that were more typically sci-fi, I still appreciate that we have episodes here that aren't just the Doctor arrives on a planet and he meets good aliens and he meets bad aliens and he beats the bad aliens and then he goes home. Variety is the spice of life, but of course spice alone isn't enough to make a meal. And I don't want to sound flippant here, but I think that Russell T Davies served us good this season for the most part, as he was able to select a collection of some really bloody strong scripts, even if it does feel in the wider spectrum of things that he did make a bit of a meal of this season. And these twists, these cute little elements, these moments of creative flair do stop the season itself from being too formulaic. With seasons like this, the Doctor needs to think a lot more creatively, fourth dimensionally in some cases, to save the day, which, yes, can be a pain in the backside and can lead to situations where it does feel a bit Deus Ex Machina-y, but again, it does add some variety here that makes it feel less formulaic. Though with that said, you're still boiling it down to the Doctor sticks something into a thing, but at least it's done in a way which feels more creative. With that in mind, maybe the thing I'm praising more here is more the flair of the season, more so than creativity itself. Like, there's a confidence here that was lacking in prior seasons, and a willingness to just say, look, we're going to take a creative risk here. We are going to do something that we've not done in Doctor Who, or not done in a very long time. And it does it in a way which, yes, some audiences don't appreciate, and some showrunners wouldn't touch with a barge pole. But with that said, it's being done in a way which feels light-hearted, with an air of whimsy and eccentricity to it, which is something I think has been missing from Doctor Who in a very long time, and I don't think has really been that present throughout the modern run, full stop. Like, I could easily see the fourth wall break in the Lux episode being done in a far more existential, dark way in the hands of another writer, but under Russell D Davies' tutelages, it ends up becoming something that's a lot more wacky and a lot more self-referential, but in a way that doesn't feel too self-referential. Yes, I know that it is meta without much purpose, but at least it's done for a joke, when for the most part it feels as though over the past decade we've had a lot of meta moments that themselves haven't been substantive. Like, Doctor Who has always had issues with trying to do meta commentary. I mean, you just have to look to the tail end of the 1980s where you get a lot of episodes that are very much about the meta commentary of where Doctor Who finds itself in the moment. And I will be honest, none of them were particularly good, none of them have aged particularly well, and I think a lot of them are overhyped by fans that really have been blinded more nostalgia than actually the quality of the episodes themselves. So to just have episodes where you can have fourth wall stuff that is just a wink and a gag, I'm willing to tolerate, because at least it's something that feels a bit different. This is something you should always take with a pinch of salt when I'm talking about how much I love the creativity of this run of Doctor Who, is I am someone who really loves the second Doctor's run. The Patrick Troughton era had some blindingly wild and creative episodes. Like, people can complain about the fourth wall stuff in Lux all they want, but that kind of just nutty craziness is nothing compared to the stuff that happened in The Mind Robbers, where at one point the Doctor's companion suddenly becomes a superhero and starts beating up a bad guy. Like, modern Doctor Who wouldn't go that goofy, but classic Doctor Who did, and if modern Doctor Who even went within an inch of getting that way, you'd have a lot of people saying that Doctor Who's jumped the shark. Well, let's be honest, given certain things happened more recently, there's bigger things that make me think Doctor Who's jumped the shark, but that's a whole other discussion. Maybe had this been maybe a 14 episode or a 12 episode run, that these far more eccentric episodes would have sat down a lot better, particularly last season, where it felt as though every single episode was a lot more out there and a lot more creative, and just Russell T Davies seeing what he could get away with now that he had Disney's money. And this year, either because Disney told him to stop pissing money up the wall, or maybe he got a clue and realised that, yeah, not everybody wants episodes about space babies and personified music and TikTok stars, and actually people want something a bit more substantive, things have swifted about. And that gives us this feeling for me that makes it feel as though this season has a calmer tone overall, which I will admit that when I said that in the headline positives, it might seem a bit odd, particularly bearing in mind I've just praised the creativity and the imaginativeness and the flair and the confidence that this season could have had in various different moments. But like I say, compared to last season, this is far calmer. Last season, and yes, this is also including the special where David Tennant had gods dancing to Spice Girls, music personified, song and dance numbers with the Beatles and Cilla Black, death gods, crossovers with Strictly Come Dancing, musical numbers, dance routines, talking babies, all that stuff. Again, I love that kind of level of creativity, and I love that Doctor Who is like the only show that you can do this kind of shit on, and it feels as though it's still keeping with the feel of everything without it feeling like the series has just totally gone out of left field. And I do appreciate there are people out there that didn't like that stuff, and as I've just said, I think that stuff would have worked better had it been part of a season that was longer. Like if you had a 14 or 16 episode season and every 4 or 5 episodes you had one of these nutty crazy episodes, people would have been able to tolerate a lot more. But that was not the case this time, but that's just the way that things washed out. This season, whilst you do have killer cartoons and Eurovision in space and space-time defying barbershops, it's all done with less of an over-the-top flair, but done in a way which feels a lot more confident, in a way that this is just the way things are, and not, look at me, look at all this money that I have, woohoo! Like, you could easily have had a situation where in the story engine, where things really went weird and strange, where you start people diving into stories and having cartoon characters pop up here, there, and everywhere. But that wasn't the case. You had something that was a lot more conventional. You could easily have had a thing where, oh no, the big bad wolf is here to attack people because it's come to life. It's the original fear, woohoo! But you didn't. Instead, you had a story which is about stories itself. And yes, I know a lot of people don't like the fact it felt a lot more talky than showy, but still, it's a story about storytelling and people are telling stories, so I can tolerate that. It is able to find the right tone for the material that it has in a way that the previous season wasn't able to do so. Classic Doctor Who could be weird. It could be strange and far more eccentric than other sci-fi shows, and that is a fact that people need to get through their thick fucking skulls, that you could have stories and storylines that feel more like something that you'd expect to see in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or in Red Dwarf or in Futurama than a lot of people are willing to admit. It just so happens that when Doctor Who does it, it's doing it because this is just an element of how this show feels, and not because this is an entire comedy show, or this is something that's comedy adjacent. And even if it isn't for the entirety of an episode or entirety of a story, there are still silly moments that just wouldn't happen in other programs. And we have to stop pretending as though Doctor Who was always this super serious, straight-laced science fiction action show, or science fiction fantasy show, when it frankly wasn't. You could have silly and odd moments. I mean, throughout this season, they've had people speculating, oh, the gods of Ragnarok are going to come back. Yeah, and you remember what episode they were introduced in? In an episode that was a meta-commentary about the state of Doctor Who. An episode where Sylvester McCoy used all his magic man sleight of hand tricks to dazzle these god things. Like, let's not pretend as though that was just a very straight-laced episode. And I think that was also in a season where we had a squeaky-voiced robot covered in candy, for goodness sake. Doctor Who has had sillier moments, yes. And this season has also had silly moments. But they are just moments. They are not things that override the elements that they're in. They don't override the sense of threat or otherworldliness of the episodes that they take place in. And they are things that make those episodes a lot more interesting, a lot stranger, and a lot more uncanny in some cases. Yeah, sure, the Lux episode does get problematically close to jumping the shark in that episode, but it's still done in a way which feels as though it's keeping within the spirit of Doctor Who more generally, and still gives us an episode which feels like an adventure to a degree or another. The Devil's Chord doesn't quite do that, as by the end of the episode you get that long Strictly Come Dancing dance number, which was more distracting than anything else, and just... Look, I'm someone that loves Strictly Come Dancing. I have a soft spot for ballroom dancing and all that crap. I'm someone who watches Eurovision religiously, for fuck's sake. But even I was rolling my eyes at that because it just felt like it was a bit too bloody much. This year's season has had many issues, and the fact that I will praise it for the fact it didn't go quite all the way to Leventy stupid. It knew at what moment to pull back and not get too silly. But sadly, when it got to that final episode, it does feel as though it got a little bit too silly, and not in the fun let's have a dance number way, but in the... Well, let's get on to that and get into the negatives, and the headline negatives. I think that too many episodes didn't stick the landing, the soundtrack is terrible, and I think that Gatwa's exit muddles the ending. So let's just get into that. I think that whilst the season itself is strong overall, and again, it's pound for pound better than the previous seasons and the David Tennant specials, and I will be honest, most of the latter half of the Chibnall era. I'm not a Chibnall apologist, but I think there's more quality than the people are saying, but still, there's no getting away from the fact that in this year's season, there were just too many episodes for me that just didn't stick the landing. They go to some interesting places, they have some thrilling moments, but the ending of them just doesn't work. That final ending, or that final act, is where a lot of things just start to fall apart. And I don't mean that in purely creative and mechanical terms. Sometimes it can be just rather a personal sense. So there's an element of it that doesn't work with me. Now, I'm not going to go through all the episodes I think had weak endings or didn't wrap themselves up in a way which felt, well, good by my standings. But I think the opening episode is a great example of this. I'm not going to go full into a second review on it, but I was really behind the episode until it became clear that this wasn't, oh, the Doctor is fighting robots over what feels like an administrative error, and they instead became Doctor Who versus the planet of the Incel. And I really turned hard against it when the big solution to the idea and the problem of toxic masculinity and incel culture ultimately boiled down to ignore the problem until it goes away, because that's ultimately the subtext of the episode itself. Like, I have no issue with Doctor Who tackling difficult subject matter. I have no issue with Doctor Who tackling matters of the moment. But when it tackles these things, it has to be done in a way that is mature and in a way that treats the subject matter with a degree of respect. Even if at the end of the day it thinks that the matter at hand is silly and this is how we solve it, there still needs to be a this is how we solve it like moment. And at the end of the day, that episode didn't have that. It is an episode that ultimately decides, you know what, just ignore the problem, it'll go away. You have episodes like that at the end of the day just kind of fall apart towards the end of it. And me as a viewer, I should say, as someone who's a fan of Doctor Who, it's hard to work up the enthusiasm to re-watch those episodes, knowing full well that they fall apart in the final 5 to 10 minutes. Even if the scenes up until that moment are good, even the episode itself up until that moment is good and enjoyable, minus the cat murder, you know that when you get into that final act that things are going to fall apart rapidly, so why the hell would I want to return to an episode that I know isn't good? Next on, moving on, look, let's just touch upon the soundtrack, and in my notes I've just written, the soundtrack is terrible, go nuts. And I'm not going to go nuts because it's getting on a little bit now, it's nearly 5 o'clock and my throat's starting to get sore, but I will just say that I fucking hate Murray Gold as a composer. I hate every single goddamn piece of music he's made for this goddamn series, or at least everything he's done during the Russell T Davies Mark II era. There are so many moments, so many otherwise fantastic moments in this series where have been undermined by these overpowering, overblown, over-the-top nature of the soundtracks that he's putting there. Soundtracks that feel so over-the-top and farcical, it feels as though they've been parachuted in from the wrong program. I remember watching the debut episode of the modern run of Doctor Who, and there was the moment where Graham Norton's voice picked in for some reason because he left a microphone on, and it made it feel for a split second like Rose Tyler was accidentally walking on someone watching his TV program or something. But, you know, it's like that. It's like someone that just suddenly interrupts things, someone that's been brought in from a different program, from a different channel that's overpowering what's going on the BBC. It's the kind of soundtrack you'd expect to hear in some big, silly costume melodrama, or piped in from some kind of crappy 1950s, 1960s B-movie. Someone that swallows up what's happening on scene and reduces it to the point of feeling like a parody. And that would be tolerable if that was the vibe that we're going for some of these moments. But when you have a moment as pivotal to the history of the program as the Doctor regenerating, and it feels like something out of a bloody game show, I shouldn't be sat there thinking, God almighty, what a terrible idea. Because that's what it sounds like. It sounds like something out of a game show. It sounds as though Paddy McGuinness should be coming around the corner to tell us we're about to get into the double money round or something. And we have moments like that throughout the entire run of things. And at least before, it felt as though the music was playing to the scene itself. Like, I often joke about the dun 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 music playing in the background, but when that stuff was playing, it was when there was some kind of thrilling piece of action going on, the Doctor running and pointing at things while vomiting out exposition. Here we don't get that, as it feels like it's music for moments like that, but it's put in scenes where it doesn't belong. It's put in scenes where it feels as though it's taking so much. There will be that moment will haunt my dreams when I think about this episode, when you have Belinda coming out of her house, Realizing that her life might be a lie, she goes by the side of that river and starts to scream passionately out of confusion and fear, yet the music playing in the background, as I said in my review, feels like one of two things is going to happen. Either Mr. Darcy's going to appear from the bushes, or Dracula's going to start descending on people and attacking them. It feels so totally out of tone and totally out of kilter for what's happening in that moment. It ruins what should be a powerful moment of drama. Yes, I know that not everybody likes the kind of soundtrack music that I like. Yes, I know there are a lot of people who love Murray Gold's soundtracks, but when I'm watching this, as an actor, as a writer, as a director, if I was to sit here and watch a piece that I put together and this is the music that they had chosen to put behind the stuff that was happening on screen, I'd kick off, because you're undermining the strength of the actors. These are the people that make or break what you're doing, and at the end of the day, they're being served up. Their powerful moments of drama, their powerful moments of acting are being undermined by soundtracks that make it feel so bloody twee, so bloody silly that it really is disheartening. Like I've got no fears that Vaja Sethu and Kuti Gatwa aren't going to get work out. They're going to get work from here on out. They're going to be in other things, other TV shows. But I'm just imagining that if they were actors starting out, and Vada ended up showing that scene when she's running out and the dramatic, over-the-top soap opera music was playing in the background as part of like a show reel. No one's going to take that shit seriously. So why the hell should we as an audience take it? You know what, I'm going off too far now. We're going off too far. This review's going on too far. But needless to say, I hate the soundtrack, and I look forward to the days when Murray Gold isn't part of this show, because god damn it, we really need a new style for this series. It's not working. Anyway, let's get into that final episode. I'm not going to do a full-on near-second review of it, but look, I knew going into that it was going to be a mess by virtue of being a Russell T Davies season ender. And I don't say that out of some kind of hatred towards him, because beyond anything else, whilst I might question some of his creative decisions, I have a ton of respect for Russell T Davies, and I think he deserves a lot more respect from a certain section of the fan base than he's getting right now. Because when he serves, he really fucking serves. When he brings his A game, he's easily one of the best writers on television, one of the best writers full stop. And it's bloody amazing when he nails things. And anyone who says otherwise is a damn liar or just has a different opinion. But you get the point. When he brings his A game, he really brings it. But his season enders have always been his weakest part. It's almost like he has J.J. Abrams disease, where he thinks the mystery box and the mystery itself is more important than what is in the box or what the reveal is. Season-long mysteries in Doctor Who, in the Russell T Davies era and regrettably in the Stephen Moffat era, usually never mattered. Because they're never... whatever's being teased won't ever be the thing that the Doctor is facing off against. Apart from maybe a few moments or a brief scene or two where they are literally being there. Like Bad Wolf never meant anything. There was no secret double meaning to it. There was no code word that was really associated with it. Oh, sure, you have this bad wolf entity, but that's something that only really exists for the sake of that episode. Oh, sure, maybe it'll become a thing in the not too distant future if the response to Billy Piper being the new Doctor really is as allergic as some people are saying, but at the end of the day, it didn't matter. The fact that Torchwood was the big mystery of the second season ultimately didn't matter. A, because we knew there was a spin-off with that name coming anyway, and B, because quite simply you could have had that grand finale set in any other tower block in the world and it would have ultimately had the same thing. But, you know, beyond all of that, leaving that side to one side, I think that this episode becoming a leaving episode, becoming a regeneration episode, it's clear that that was done after the fact. I'm not going to come down on Kuti Gatwa for choosing to leave. It was his decision, and I've enjoyed his time as the Doctor as much as he's actually had chance to actually play the Doctor, because at times it does feel like he was treated as some kind of Ken doll. Just look at this is his thing that he can do. He can sing and he can dance, so let's get him singing and dancing, when really he should have been acting and performing more, but that's a discussion for a whole other time. I think that there is a tragic number of people out there that have been bollocking him for no good reason. A lot of those people feel like people who have never enjoyed Doctor Who, let alone have seen an episode in 20 years, if ever. But with that side of things is to put to one side, and again, I'm not ragging on him, it's clear that that regeneration sequence and that element of the episode was something that was put into the episode late into production. Something that only becomes clearer as from story leaks and from promotional stills that ultimately showed that the stuff that was supposed to happen never came to fruition. I'm not going to reveal what was supposed to happen in this review, because it's something that may come up in a future season, and I don't want to spoil things for people, but needless to say, what I've learned about it in the past couple of days, it would have made for a better ending, and there's no getting away from that fact. But the truth of the matter is that that scene, that sequence of events, was so bloody clumsy that it felt like the final joke, like the final punchline. An episode that itself felt like such a mess, ended up in such a clunky and messy way. I guess there was no hope in getting him to hold on for a Christmas special and having regenerate there. I suppose that was totally out of the question. And I suppose also just saying, look, we'll take a break and we'll see how you're feeling in a few months' time, and then maybe we'll do something, was also out of the question too, as there was probably kind of contract requirements with Disney. But still, there's a part of me that can't help but feel that maybe they could have reshot something. Like maybe during the fight with Omega, it's a little bit more costly for the Doctor. Like the device that he's using backfiring and it electrocutes himself. Then you can have a brief scene with him stumbling down a corridor, or it looks as though he's going to start regenerating, but he holds back. A little insert scene with something there. At least then it feels like it's part of the episode, rather than something was just put in because, oh crap, he's leaving and we don't have time to do anything else. Like, I don't want to get into how I would have done it territory, but I think this ultimately goes another step to undermining the episode, as this is an episode that felt like it had 4 endings, and that maybe had we gone with something a little more concrete, there'd only been 1, or 2, or even just 3, and 3's more tolerable having 4 endings. And respectfully, the way they handled it doesn't feel like an art from adversity kind of thing, it just feels like a tumble or a stumble, as it creates drama that doesn't feel like it's earned. No disrespect to Gatwa or Russell T Davies, but it's clear that this wasn't part of the episode, as there's nothing within the episode itself that feels as though we're building up to that. As such, the idea of it being a shock exit ends up becoming a lot more shocking, because there's nothing in the episode that really feels as though we're building up to that. Like, much of the season itself doesn't feel as though we're building up to Omega being brought back as a skeleton boggling, yet that's where we are. And again, once again, the skeleton boggling didn't mean anything in the end. It could have been anyone, could have been anything, and in the end, it was nothing. Thank you very much. What a waste of time. With all that said and done, however, let's get into the overview, and my overall feelings with this season are honestly very mixed. The high points are very high, and it just goes some way to recapturing that sense of wonder that an adventure that has been lost from this series for quite some time. But at the end of the day, I would be lying if I said that getting to the end of this season I didn't feel rather disappointed. And this isn't because a fan theory of mine didn't work out, or because I thought it was too woke, or I'm butthurt that Omega, Rani and the Susan Performance reappearances ultimately didn't mean much. Because at the end of the day, it's more so that as a whole entity, this season ends much like any other Russell T Davies season finale. It ends like pretty much any that have gone before him. It ends with a bit of a confused mess that ends up undermining what came before it. And regrettably, the messy endings are something that we see frequently in many episodes of this season. There are some brilliant episodes, even if they aren't ones that they sing the praises to hell and back. But they're still ones that function well. And even the ones that do stumble towards the end of it, they were good up until a moment, but regrettably at the end of the day, this season was just too much of a mess for me. I mean, yes, I could, if I really wanted to, construct my own alternate season using pre-existing episodes and pre-existing story beats, I suppose, and just skip the episodes I don't like, but I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to be in a position where I'm turning around and saying I'm not going to watch an episode of Doctor Who. Like, I shouldn't have to be in that position. But regrettably, that's where we ended up finding ourselves here. Like, there's, again, a lot to enjoy with this season. But it's ultimately let down by stuff that really shouldn't be the case. Too many episodes don't have a strong enough ending. Ncuti Gatwa's ending from the series really muddles things. I feel like it could have been done better, but I suppose he just did the best with what they could do. Like, I don't want to get it wrong, I did enjoy a lot of this season, but it doesn't really feel like much of a piece of television. It feels like it's just it feels like a bundle. It feels like less like a season of Doctor Who, and more like a bundle with a bonus. Here's a special two-parter that comes at the end of it, like a sweetener because you bought the season pass. Again, it's not bad, but it should be better given the pedigree of work that's going into this. Well, that's said and done, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. Here I am at 23 minutes past 10 on Friday morning. I've hardly any sleep, so good luck everybody. We got a comment from Big X1 who says, honestly, I think the episode was fine, but for the finale episode of a season, it was a letdown. I don't get the bit with Billie Piper at the end. Some people saying she's the 16th Doctor, others saying that she isn't. So much of it feels like a muddy mess. It's a shame Gatwa has gone, but I can't say we're missing. Thank you for your comment, and with Gatwa, I think, I don't know. I think it's just a case of from most of the things, I don't think he had really had much of a chance to shine. As far as the stuff with Billie Piper, I've heard a rumour on the grapevine that whether or not she's going to be the Doctor ultimately bears down on how the fan base is going to respond to it. If people respond well, then Russell T Davies is going to have her as a 16th Doctor. If people react allergically to it, then she's not. And it's one of those cases of which fans is she going to listen to? Or is he going to listen to? Is he going to listen to the fans that tell him he's wonderful and he should come back as the showrunner and should bring back David Tennant and all that kind of malarkey? Or is he going to listen to the people that are saying that, wait, even I think this is a bad idea? Because I've not watched the videos because, quite frankly, I don't want needlessly stupid negativity in my life at the best of times. But I've seen a lot of videos, particularly from channels that generally have been more receptive and more warm to the past two seasons of Doctor Who, saying, no, this is the moment the series that jumped the shark, which for me is like, this is the thing that's jumping the shark, not bringing back David Tennant. This is the thing that's jumping the shark, really? But in any case, that's a rant for another time. As I said towards the start of this video, I've had very little sleep. But anyway, let me know what you thought about this particular season of Doctor Who. I don't know when the next Doctor Who video is going to be. It'll probably be around the time if there's a Christmas special, but at this point, Christ only knows. There's a non-zero chance that the last thing that we see of the modern run of Doctor Who is Kuti Gatwa regenerating into Billie Piper, so good luck everybody. But anyway, thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!